Hi, my name is Alana Williams, and I am from Louisville, Kentucky. I love listening to Scandal Water while I paint with watercolors, which I often do for hours at a time.
Welcome to Scandal Water, where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
and Ashley,
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1. Stories in Scandal Water. It's where you need to be. Stories in Scandal Water. Let's pour you a cup of tea.
Good morning, Ashley.
Good morning, Candy.
I am excited about this new month and our new theme, and especially about this episode.
I know.
You know, it's kind of fun. Guys, we're going to give you a little peek behind the scenes by telling you that we did not anticipate doing this episode.
We did not.
This was
no.
not a topic that was intended to be covered when we started planning out our March theme, you know, the episodes that would fall during this month, which, by the way, is centered around sports. To be specific, our theme is March into Sports Madness.
Very brilliant.
And so we thought we had this wonderful layout, and just to build a little anticipation, we put a poll on Facebook and we asked our listeners to weigh in as to their favorite sports movie of all time.
Right.
So we correctly anticipated that some of the beloved sports classics like Hoosiers and Remember the Titans would get a lot of love. We were absolutely correct about that. But I don't think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, I don't think either one of us anticipated that the winner would actually come in as being A League of Their Own.
I know. I remember saying to you, are we going to do an episode on A League of Their Own now? Is that what's getting ready to happen?
Yeah. I mean, it was an upset to us.
Yeah, it was.
And we were like, we are absolutely doing an episode on A League of Their Own.
Yeah, because we had another episode planned.
Yes. But how exciting, because honestly, I'd forgotten how much I do love this movie.
It was really good.
And the other fun thing that came out of that poll was that we had a few of our friends weigh in the comment section telling us that they had some connections.
I know.
Yeah. So, for example, Catherine shared that her father, who attended Bosse High School, was an extra in the bleachers when they filmed at Bosse Field. And another friend and listener, Marsha, shared that she herself was an extra one day. I actually reached out to Marsha and I asked if she might share a brief audio clip telling us about her experience, and she was kind enough to send us this.
My name is Marsha Jasper. In the summer of 1991, my friends and I traveled to Bosse Field in Evansville, Indiana, to be extras in the filming of A League of Their Own. And though we never appeared on screen, we were able to watch stars such as Rosie O'Donnell, Tom Hanks, Madonna, Geena Davis, and Penny Marshall film scenes over and over. We also received an official t-shirt that says, I was an extra. Watching the stars film the scenes over and over could sometimes be a little bit long and boring, so I do remember Rosie O'Donnell coming out during the middle of one of those scenes and just cutting up and being funny and trying to entertain all of us while we were sitting in the stands so that we didn't get too awfully bored and leave or, you know, something like that. But anyway, it was a fun, exciting adventure and we enjoyed ourselves.
Thank you, Marsha, for sending that in. It is always so fun to hear those firsthand stories.
It really is.
Oh, and Marsha was also nice enough to send in a photo of the shirt that she received that day. So we will put that in our show notes.
Excellent. Okay, so before you share your lovely summary that you always do, can I tell you how much of a laugh I got when I was watching this on Amazon Streaming? And do you know what the summary was on Amazon Streaming? It said, 2 sisters joined a female baseball team. I was like, geez, Amazon, make it sound a little more boring. Like, wow, yeah, I'm going to watch this. That's what it said. That's all it said.
That's awful.
Yeah, it was
Somebody
terrible.
got paid for that,
They
probably.
They did.
Okay, we could do that job. All right. Well, you're right. I am heading right into the summary, and I think it's a little better than that.
Can you do better than Amazon?
I'll try. The challenge accepted. We'll see.
2 redheaded sisters joined a... Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, well, A League of Their Own came out, by the way, in 1992.
The year before. The greatest year in movies.
That's right.
Yes.
I forgot for a second there.
I know.
It was PG rated. The script writers were Babalu Mandel and Lowell Gans. and the film was directed by Penny Marshall.
Penny!
And here is the much anticipated summary. As America's stock of athletic young men is depleted during World War II, a professional all-female baseball league springs up in the Midwest, funded by publicity-hungry candy maker Walter Harvey. Competitive sisters Dottie Henson and Kit Keller spar with each other, Scout Ernie Capadino, and grumpy has-been coach Jimmy Dugan on their way to fame. So before we go any further, let's share a few of our reactions to the movie.
I liked it a lot. I hadn't watched it in a really long time, and I was surprised that it didn't have a copy. I had to get it off Amazon and stream it. But I enjoyed it. But I will say, as a teaser to when we get to that, I enjoyed it up until the ending. I wasn't a fan of the ending.
Ooh, that'll be fun to talk about then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also loved my rewatch. I did remember loving it upon my first viewing, but this brought it all back. And I think I'm stating the obvious, but I think first and foremost, the thing that I loved about this movie was that I was so unaware prior to viewing this about that entire piece of our history. That was such an eye-opener to me. And it was so empowering. I love that we had a strong female cast. We had a strong female sports movie. And it was based on truth.
I know. I loved that. I loved every bit of that. My beef with it has nothing to do with the history of it. It's just I didn't like the written ending. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah. At watching this, it appealed to my emotions. Yeah. I laughed. Oh, yeah. I got caught up in it. Yes, I did too. And I thought some of the, I don't know how to say this, some of the very real occurrences that they dealt with, they were able to bring home to me. For example, when there was that scene where Gary Marshall, as the candy maker, the mogul who owns it, he's representing Philip Wrigley. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But when he's speaking to the
Ira,
yes, that's the fella he had put in charge of putting his team together, and he's basically just so dismissively saying,
"We don't need him anymore.
We don't need him anymore. The men are coming back.
Yeah, we don't need him anymore.
Let's just break it up."
Yeah,
that
gave voice to what they were thinking back then.
It did, and it also gave voice to so many other experiences, I think, across life or across history, where we ask people to step up. Society will say, you can't, and then there's a need, and we'll say, no, step up and do it, and then suddenly we don't need you anymore.
I like when he said, what are we going to do, tell the men to go to the kitchen?
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
But it was a good way to bring out, it was good exposition. That part was really good, showing that's what they thought back then.
Yeah. And the fact that they were basically using the women, or at least some people were, and then others were not. Others really saw the value.
Ira really came to their side.
Yes. So there were so many things we loved about this movie. We will talk more about that, obviously, as we go along. But why don't we go ahead and jump into talking about that history piece?
Do you have in your notes that this is the most successful baseball movie of all time?
I do.
Is that not incredible?
I love that. To this day.
Yes.
To this day.
More than Field of Dreams and Bull Durham combined.
I love it.
That's from IMDb.
It makes me so happy. So the historical accuracy, that is something that people talk about quite a bit. And obviously this was fictionalized. There were definitely things that they took and they changed. They mixed it up. They tried to Hollywoodize a little bit. But I was impressed by how much of this was based on truth. So just to walk through a few of these, I'm not going to do a deep dive, but I'm going to hit on some things. There really was a wealthy mogul behind the start of the Women's Baseball League. As we've already said, it was Philip K. Wrigley, the chewing gum mogul, rather than a chocolate mogul, candy bar mogul, right? Philip's father was William Wrigley, who bought the Cubs back in 1920 and after whom Wrigley Field was named.
Yeah, that's pretty important.
By the time of World War II, William had passed, which meant that his son Philip now owned both the chewing gum company and the Cubs. Okay, so according to the AAGPBL website, that stands for All American Girls Professional Baseball League website, so this is from their telling of the history. By the fall of 1942, many minor league teams had disbanded due to the war. Young men 18 years of age and over were being drafted into the armed services. The fear that this pattern would continue and that major league baseball parks across the country were in danger of collapse is what prompted Philip K. Wrigley, again this chewing gum mogul, to search for a possible solution to this dilemma. As Jon Lovitz's character says in the movie, we're starting a girls' baseball league so we can make a buck while the boys are overseas.
Yeah,
they really
it's a business.
Yeah, they needed money. They were also afraid baseball was going to take this huge hit.
No pun intended.
Nice. So the All-American Girls League was officially started in 1943. Just as they showed in the movie, there really were 4 women's teams when the league first started. They used the actual names that they
yes.
back in
Right.
Yes. So those were authentic. Initially, their intent was to have the girls play softball, but with the assistance of a pro baseball player, actually he was a former pro baseball player, they actually came up with a version of the game that was a hybrid of softball and baseball. So it was not the official baseball rules, but it was close to it. Okay. They thought that would draw more crowds and it would be more appealing for the audience if it played.
It resembled more like baseball.
Right. The first year that they played, there was underhanded pitching, and they switched that out in year 2. So the game changed a little bit, and because the game changed a little bit, they also changed the name of the girls' league over time. But what they finally settled was what I've just named, the AAPGBL. Okay. Now, the movie also was accurate when it hinted at, it didn't go into detail, but it talked about the expectation that was placed on the ladies to act and look a certain way. It was actually a much bigger deal back in the 1940s in real life. According to the same website, AAPGBL website, quote, femininity was a high priority. Wrigley contracted with Helena Rubinstein's beauty salon to meet with the players at spring training. After their daily practices, the women were required to attend Rubinstein's evening charm school classes. The proper etiquette for every situation was taught, and every aspect of personal hygiene, mannerisms, and dress code was presented to all the players. In an effort to make each player as physically attractive as possible, each player received a beauty kit and instructions on how to use it. Entertainment Online said shorter hairstyles were a must, as was the etiquette training featured in the film, and if women dared smoke, drink, wear pants in public, or even step out without makeup, they were subject to fines.
Wow.
Life magazine offered this quote, league rules establish she must always wear feminine attire, cannot smoke or drink in public, cannot have dates except with, quote, old friends, and then only with the approval of the ever-present team chaperone. So they were very, very monitored, very
Well, they're a
guided,
commodity.
and
They're doing this for a business. It's just, it's a business.
Absolutely. So because they were supposed to look so appealing and feminine, it was 100% accurate when they showed those uniforms that those women were expected to wear.
They said, we can't play in this, and they said, you're going to play in a skirt or you're not going to play.
Right. Which was criminal in some ways.
It is.
Because they did not have protective covering.
No.
It was, when they showed that bruise in the film.
It was real.
It was real, and it took her, it was different sources to different amounts of time. One source said over a year before that bruise went away, that strawberry on her leg. But I found the most delightful, I'll put this in the show notes, I found this most delightful, I guess you would call it a photo gallery of photos from the original Girls League. One of those shows a girl with her leg being bandaged up, and it looks very reminiscent of what you see in the movie.
Yeah.
And you see them, obviously, in their uniforms. A League of Their Own did such a good job of representing the way those girls actually had to dress. That's another accuracy. Now, the AAGPBL launched in 1943, and it outlasted the war. At its peak, it went up to, I think it was 10 teams. Another source said it was even more than that, but it was they grew
more
over
than
time.
4.
And the attendance at one point was over 900,000.
Wow.
It actually kind of peaked around 48, 49 before it ultimately folded in 1954. The Peaches, the Rockford Peaches, and the South Bend Blue Sox were the only 2 teams to play in the league from start to finish, all the way through, according to Sports Illustrated. And Life magazine offered this comment as to what led to the end of the league. Quote, the league's decentralization, a dearth of qualified players, and the rise of televised major league games eventually led to its demise, with players retiring their gloves after the close of the 1954 season.
So around 10, 12 years. Yeah. That's how long they did this.
Yeah. And people, this is one thing that was a little inaccurate. They said there was a lot of interest in watching these women play, you know, all along. It wasn't, they didn't have to resort to some of those gimmicky
I wondered
things
about that,
they
the gimmicky
showed.
stuff in the film.
Yeah. The interest was actually
there from the start.
Yeah. And not, I mean, it obviously grew. They had to play well, you know, and they did use some strategies. The girls being in those little dresses was a strategy that they did use to draw people in. And we'll talk about a few of the other things that they did to try to draw crowds. But it wasn't like they had to do some of those silly gimmicky things. So what happened was between 1954, when they shut down, and the 80s, people just kind of forgot about that part of history. And it was in the 80s that they started having some reunions of these players. Aww. And in 1987, there was a documentary called A League of Their Own.
Oh.
Produced by Kim Wilson and Kelly Candale, I think, if I said that correctly, whose mother had played in that girls' league, and film director Penny Marshall, who was a big baseball fan.
She went to it?
Yep. She'd never heard of this before herself. She saw the project, totally got caught up in it, and she knew she wanted to make a movie about this. Now, there were some other people who were considered for directing, but she ends up with this project pretty early on, and she settled in on the Rockford Peaches, which was the most successful team in that league, as the one she really kind of to make the focal point.
Yeah.
They actually had 4 championships that I believe they won between 45 and 50. Penny brought in actual players to consult with her about the making of the film and about, the exhibit that they did in the Baseball Hall of Fame. When the credits roll at the end of the movie,
They show the ladies.
yes, those are real original players
That was
from
cool.
the league. Love that. So I ran across, for its 30th anniversary, this Zoom reunion that was called Reuniting the Stars Who Made the Movie A League of Their Own. Like We Never Left. It was by SNY, and it's on YouTube.
Okay.
And it's delightful.
Aw.
They had so many of the actors there, including Geena Davis, Lori Petty, several. And one of the questions they asked was about what it was like to work with and to meet these players from the original Women's League. I'm going to play this clip that's just slightly over a minute long so you can hear directly from them. You're going to first hear from Penny Marshall's daughter, Tracy, who was Betty Spaghetti. And then you're going to hear Megan Cavanaugh chime in. She played Marla Hooch. And then you will hear Lori Petty, who played Kit.
Okay.
I know one of the things that really helped you guys develop your characters was getting to know the real women of this league. What were some of the stories that really touched you and helped you develop your characters?
Well, we became friends with them. They came and sort of lived with us on the set, and then for 30 years after, are still friends. They came, gave us more love than we'd ever experienced, and trained us to play baseball, and told us some of the greatest stories ever.
We really just wanted to make them proud when we were filming. Like, that was like, this was my first movie. I didn't know anything from anything. And my goal was just to make them happy and proud of our work.
When the movie came out in 92, and then it became a hit in 93, and then they became celebrities again. And it was really cool because they got, they're just desserts. Like, it came a million years later, but they had so much fun meeting their fans and meeting little girls, and the little girls saying, "Oh my God, I can play ball too." Like, "Yeah, you can play ball too."
What'd you think about that?
That was sweet.
I know, I love that. And I think that they made such a great point. It took a long time for these women's story to get told and for them to be honored. But boy, did this movie do that,
Like you said, a million years later, but they loved it.
Yes. And it was just such a nice relationship, the way that they supported the movie and the movie supported them. And these people, the actors and the actual players, have these enduring friendships.
I know, and they loved each other. I love that.
Well, let's move on to talk about casting.
All right.
One of the things that was really important to Penny Marshall and the filmmakers in general was they wanted this to be very authentic. They wanted to cast women
who could play baseball. I read that they made them try out.
Yes, you had to do the screening first.
Yeah.
If you could not play the sport, you could not audition.
I love that.
Yes, that's actually something that the actress who played Kit, Lori Petty, mentioned, I believe in this Zoom interview, that she had to audition something like 8 times before she actually got cast because they were stringent.
Yeah, they should be.
Yes.
Take it seriously.
Absolutely. Geena Davis was obviously brought on to play Dottie. I will tell you really quickly, in terms of playing the game, she was one of the ones who did not know how to play. She came on late. I'm about to tell you why in a second, but she came into it late after everybody else had already been training for like 3 months.
Yeah, I remember reading this, and then she picked it up and she exceeded them in. This woman is amazing. One day we need to do an episode just on Geena Davis because I'm sure you know this. She was a semifinalist in the Olympic trials in archery.
Yes.
She just, after 2.5 years, she said, "You know what? I think I'll be an archer." 2.5 years of training.
The really cool part is that she gives a League of Their Own credit for that.
Yeah.
She did not understand how athletic she was. She did not have confidence in her abilities. She's a very tall woman.
She's really tall.
6 feet tall. She commented that she'd always basically thought of herself as being kind of awkward and gawky. And after coming in and doing this movie and playing this sport, yes, it's what gave her the confidence to realize she could try other things. And that's why she ended up going into archery.
At age 41. Thank you very much.
Yes. Loved that story. But she did her own splits. Now, she didn't slide into it. She brought in a stunt. They brought in a stunt double to do the slide into the splits. But Penny Marshall asked her if she could do it. And she basically just worked on it and her flexibility until she could do the splits herself. And they had the stunt double just do that one part. And that's the only stunt double
in the whole thing
used.
That's incredible.
The women did their own games, their own stunts. Yes. Talking more about Geena and the story of how she came into this role. First, I should tell you, it's funny, different sources said different things, but something that they all agree on is that the characters in this movie were not specifically developed from one real player, but they were always based on true stories. So different sources said that Dottie Henson was inspired by first baseman Dorothy Dottie Kamenchak, baseball legend Dottie Collins, who pitched 17 shutouts during her 6-year career, and Pepper Pear Davis. Those are 3 women believed to have inspired Dottie's character. A lot of different actresses were considered for this role at different times, some of them including Brooke Shields and Laura Dern. Penny Marshall said that she really wanted Demi Moore to do it.
Interesting.
But she became pregnant, so that took her out of the running. Yeah. And then Deborah Winger was actually cast. She was on board. She trained for 3 months, but when Madonna was brought on...
Oh, that's right. I remember reading this. She dropped out.
She was very unhappy. She said this basically, hiring Madonna, who was a huge star at the time, was basically equivalent to turning this into an Elvis film. And that's not what she'd agreed to do. So she dropped out.
Wow.
In an interview many years later, here's what she said. The studio agreed with me because it was the only time I ever collected a pay or play on my contract. In other words, I collected my pay even though I did not play, and that's very hard to get in court. So she didn't really change her feelings about this because all these years later, when they asked her about Madonna, she said, I think her acting career has spoken for itself.
Whoa, Deborah, whoa.
Well, what I found out was apparently Madonna had openly criticized Deborah Winger and her performance in a movie prior to this all happening. Some people think that was also a little piece of this.
Okay.
So, no love lost.
No love lost.
Between
Those
the
ladies
two of them.
were throwing some shade.
Right. But this is why Geena Davis was brought in last minute and again caught up and surpassed many of her castmates in no time at all. She mastered this game. Now, in the scenes that are supposed to be current day, of course, filmed in the 1990s, but they did not try to age Geena. Penny did not feel that it would be authentic to try to age, so instead they hired a new actress named Lynn Cartwright, who was 65 at the time she played this role. She played the older Dottie, and they dubbed her Geena's voice.
Yeah, it's a very distinctive voice. You can tell that's Geena's voice.
Yeah. Now, Lori Petty, we've mentioned her several times now. She was hired to play Kit. Remember, the dynamic is these are 2 sisters who have a lot of tension.
Yeah.
Mainly on the part of Kit.
Yeah.
Because she really struggles with being compared to her older sister, feeling like she's in her shadow, feeling like she cannot...
It's kind of a Jan and Marsha. Marsha.
Yes, absolutely. Molly Ringwald was one of the ones considered for this role before
She would
Lori
have
got
matched
it.
really well with Geena, but I read that Lori was cast to match Deborah.
And she was hired because of her resemblance. Well, it was one factor was her resemblance to Deborah Winger.
Yeah.
When Geena Davis took over the part, they had to dye Lori's hair to match Geena's to make them look like sisters. Tom Hanks, of course, played the coach, Jimmy Dugan. His character was loosely based on real-life baseball sluggers Jimmy Fox and Hack Wilson. And it was true that Philip Wrigley and the owners of the different teams used that strategy to try to draw people to the games of hiring men who had some connection to baseball, some kind of impressive connection.
To be their coaches.
Right, to be the managers. They thought that would draw people in and increase interest. To realistically portray Jimmy Dugan back in 1992, Tom Hanks told Entertainment Tonight, quote, "I had to get fat."
I see him get. I can see like a weight gain through the film, because in one part I was like, he looks like Forrest Gump. His face is really skinny, and then later on in the film, his face is fatter looking. So
you saw the progression.
I saw the progression of like, oh, you must have shot this early on, and then his face definitely gets bigger.
Yeah. Well, he said he had to gain some weight.
Yeah.
I had barbecue pork ribs and enjoyed the desserts of America. And Penny Marshall said, and I believe this was in her book, that she told him, "I don't want you to be cute, because I don't want that in the dugout. I don't want the audience to be looking for the romance thing.
Yes.
Which girl is he going to pair off with?
Right.
Geena?" And Tom Hanks, commenting on that, said, she didn't want that. Penny didn't want that. So they wanted him to come across as somebody disheveled, somebody who was not appealing, not just because he might be out of shape, but just the way he acted, just his manner and his
just be
his
gross
behavior.
to the women.
Exactly. So that was something that he worked on.
Well, can I say that this Tom Hanks is getting ready to enter because I looked it up in his filmography. This is the start of a real nice stretch of work for Tom Hanks, because I'd written down that he looked like Forrest Gump, so I wondered how that fell. He was in this film in 92, Sleepless in Seattle the next year in 93, Philadelphia in 93, Forrest Gump in 94, Apollo 13 in 95, and Toy Story in 95.
But he had just come off of a few flops.
Yes.
He had come off of 4 movies that were disappointing.
Bonfire of the Vanities was right before this.
Yeah, and Penny Marshall, of course, had done big with him, which I think was 4 years prior. And then he had these movies that were not doing so well.
I saw that.
And this was
restarted it.
Yes, it was. In fact, in the same Zoom interview that we just listened to a clip from just a second ago, the interviewer asked the ladies what they thought about that. And Geena Davis said, "You're welcome."
For real.
Yes,
Tom should be thanking them.
Yes, and it was interesting because I saw an interview a long time ago that he gave where he talked about how this was a reversal of what you were seeing a lot of back in the 90s, which was you would have very male-focused plot lines. You would have a lot of strong male actors, and the females, if there were any, might just be like this small supporting love interest.
Yeah.
And he said, this is the reverse. He was a supporting actor.
He didn't even come in until 30 minutes in the film. I forgot he was in it.
Right. He was the supporting actor, this male who was not that significant. He was not that important. These women were going right on without him.
They were coaching it themselves.
And so it was really against the norm of that time in terms of movies. Let's talk about Madonna.
All right, let's do it.
I had so much fun on this one. Because you know what? I do remember back when the movie was made, there were so many articles and blurbs and quotes that were being put out about people's reactions to how Madonna behaved on set, or what things that she said would make the news. All of these different things that was big media fodder. Do you remember that? Or
no, but I read something
young?
that,
Yeah.
no, I don't remember when it came out. Yeah, I would have been 12, so I'd have been like, what's happening? But no, I remember reading that she was not happy during this filming.
Yeah. Madonna played center fielder May, and this was the height of her popularity. In fact, I saw that when Penny Marshall heard Madonna was interested and was going to be coming for a meeting to check things out, Penny went and told Rosie O'Donnell, who was already cast to play third baseman Doris Murphy, that she needed to try to connect with Madonna. Penny basically said to her,
Go be her friend.
Yes, she said, if Madonna likes you and if she likes me, she will probably take this role. And Rosie shared that she was intimidated by this request. Madonna was huge. So one of the things that she did to prep was she went and watched Madonna's Truth or Dare movie, which had just recently come out. And while she was watching, she kind of latched onto this thing that they had in common. She noticed they both came from big Catholic families. They both were named after mothers who had died young and from the same disease, which was breast cancer. And just the way that their families. Yes. So she said that when they met, that was one of the things that she immediately shared with Madonna was, I watched your movie and I saw this.
Yeah.
And she said it actually was a connection that bonded them.
They're still friends, right?
I believe so. I didn't actually look that up. But according to a Vanity Fair article published just last year, quote, from then onward, they were like siblings. Penny dubbed them Ro and Mo.
That's cute.
I know, a moniker that stuck. You're going to be best friends, she ordered. Mo, you teach her how to set her hair. And Ro, you teach her how to play ball. Because Rosie O'Donnell
She was a good player.
Yes, she knew how to play ball. She was good. So then, because of the relationship these two women developed, the screenwriters actually bumped up their storylines. They saw that they had this great chemistry, and of course these are also two actors who, you know, they had some acclaim behind them, or at least a lot of interest. They said that with Madonna on board, May became a brassier, more streetwise character, and Rosie O'Donnell was given more leeway to improvise lines.
She was a good character. I really liked her character.
Yeah. And different people talked about the fact that Rosie O'Donnell was one of the few people in the cast who wasn't intimidated by Madonna and would just be like blunt with her and tell it like it was, and that Madonna loved it.
That's great.
Like they really were like siblings. But to your point, I did see a lot about Madonna being something of a diva. One of the trivia notes said, during filming of the World Series games, stars took turns entertaining the unpaid extras.
Yeah, I saw this.
Yeah, Tom Hanks did puppet shows over the dugout. Rosie O'Donnell did stand-up comedy, and various actors pretended to be Madonna and sang her songs after the singer balked at performing for the fans. And then, did you also see that little letter that she wrote to one of her friends? Yeah, this was not the nicest wording. And again, but again, friend, what are you doing publishing Madonna's letter to you?
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, that's not nice. But I'll give you a little quote from it. Supposedly, this is what Madonna wrote to her friend. I cannot suffer any more than I have in the past month, learning how to play baseball with a bunch of girls, yuck. In Chicago, double yuck. I have a tan, I'm dirty all day, and I hardly ever wear makeup. Penny Marshall, Laverne, Geena Davis is a Barbie doll, and when God decided where the beautiful men were going to live in the world, he did not choose Chicago. I've made a few friends, but they are athletes, not actresses. They have nothing on the house of extravaganza. I wish I could come to New York.
Well, so sorry you're a movie star, Madonna.
Yeah. So that that doesn't speak well of her attitude. Other people also said she could be something of a tough critic. A Vanity Fair article mentioned that she criticized Eddie Mecca. That was her dance partner in the scene where she's at the bar and she does the jitterbug. Eddie Mecca actually was from Laverne and Shirley. He played Carmine Ragusa, Shirley's boyfriend, and so Penny Marshall had brought him in for this. But reportedly, Madonna complained to the scene's choreographer saying, he doesn't know how to partner. He's breaking my hands. And at a different time, supposedly she told that same fella, quote, Geena Davis is the most uncoordinated person I've seen in my life. I don't know how she's going to do this. So she could apparently be pretty critical, but on the flip side, during this same Zoom interview done in 2022, the interviewer asked about their experience with Madonna, and Geena was the first person who spoke up, and she said, well, I was surprised how friendly Madonna was. She was pleasantly surprised that she didn't come with an entourage, and then everybody else started chiming in about Madonna's incredible work ethic. They said this woman worked so hard, and this was mentioned also in Vanity Fair, who wrote, she rose at 4 a.m. and jogged 8 to 10 miles, then trained with Coach Hughes from 8 to noon, then headed to the dance studio to rehearse May's Jitterbug number, the highlight of a complicated set piece at the fictional Suds Bucket nightclub. On the practice field, one day she told the actresses, if anybody stays and plays until we can't see the ball anymore, then I'll take you to dinner. So she worked really hard, and that was something that everybody acknowledged.
So do you think that the other stories were made up? Could that be possible, that the letter isn't true and some friend was just looking to sell it and stir some pots? Because that seems vastly different.
I don't think so. I think probably, nothing is black or white.
Yeah.
There's always gray.
Yeah.
I suspect that there were days when she was pleasant and I think she worked hard the whole time. Everybody seemed to acknowledge that. And I think there were days when she was very friendly and very pleasant. And then other times when she probably was like, I'm
done. I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm done. Or I'm a little too good for this. I'm just going to go to my room and I'm not going to go entertain people in the stands or whatever. Now, the last thing I'll say about Madonna before we move on is that she co-wrote and sang the song, This Used to Be My Playground, for the movie. And that, of course, turned into a big hit. We have just a few more people from the cast that we'll touch on briefly before we go to break. Jon Lovitz being one. What were your thoughts about Jon Lovitz?
He was so mean. I read that they actually cut out everything but his mean stuff because the audience loved it.
I saw that too. I mean, they called him the scene stealer.
He was.
Yes, but yes, every barb he threw out, every mean one-liner was what the people loved. So they left all that in. He was the recruiter, Ernie Capadino, and Originally, they intended Jim Belushi to play that role.
Oh, that would have been, there were so many cross ties because the dad, Marla's dad, was Eddie Jones, who was Emmett in Return to Me. Did you notice that when he came on? I was like, oh, it's the guy!
I knew he looked familiar.
Yeah, and Taya Leone was one of the players on the, how do you say it, Racine? I don't know. Racine, the other team. And she was married to David Duchovny, who was in Return to Me.
Yes, so many crossovers.
And Marla went on to play Broomhilda in Robin Hood Men in Tights, which was released in the greatest year of cinema, 1993.
Nice. Well, Jon Lovitz's character, that was historically accurate too, because back in 1943, they actually did send out scouts and set up tryouts in dozens of major cities trying to bring in these very talented female players. That was accurate, and I'm really glad they got that in there. And I especially loved it because I thought he was hysterical. Ann Cusack played Shirley Baker. She was the player who couldn't read.
Oh, I thought that scene when she was standing there, I got really that's one of the scenes I was moved where she couldn't read her name, and they said then when they said, "You're with us," she was so excited.
I know. And then you saw them working to teach. It was Madonna's character.
Yeah. She's like, she's reading. What does it matter what she's reading?
But she's actually the oldest sibling in the Cusack family. Oh, and this was her first movie.
Another tie to Chicago and Return to Me.
The girls affectionately called her Annie Q, and she brought her brother John to set at least one time, who, he was already kind of a star. He had a few.
Was he?
Yeah,
I guess
at
so.
that
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
He had a
That's
few
true.
hits
You're
under his
right.
belt. Yeah. Bill Pullman played Dottie's husband, Bob Henson.
Yes. Sleepless in Seattle. Him and Rosie and Tom. And then him and Bill had a scene together. It was like, oh, Walter and Sam have a scene together.
And Biddy Schramm played baseball player Evelyn Gardner. She's the one who had the son. Oh my goodness, did they make that little boy annoying?
She ended up in Monk as Sharona.
Yes. And by the way, she's the one that the coach yells at and says there's
no crying in baseball.
Last note, we had a bit of a family affair in this as well. If you think about it, Penny Marshall had her brother Gary playing the candy maker, the owner, Walter Harvey. She had her daughter, Tracy Reiner, playing left fielder, Betty Spaghetti, but Tracy earned that role the hard way.
Yes, she did.
She showed up. She went to the open call. There were about 2,000 girls at that audition at USC. She earned it. Her niece, Kathleen Marshall, played outfielder Mumbles Brockman.
Oh, she did.
And then from Laverne and Shirley, we've already mentioned Eddie Mecca Carmine. He ends up doing the dance scene. And David L. Lander, who was Squiggy in Laverne and Shirley, had an uncredited role as a game announcer.
I kept thinking, I know that guy. Who is that guy? Yeah. That's who that was.
He was a real-life baseball fanatic who later became a scout for the Anaheim Angels.
Nice.
And so he had a little role in the movie as well.
You've missed David Strathern.
Oh, tell me.
He played Ira. He is so cute. Every time I see him on screen, the first thing I always go is, he's so cute. But he's so good, too.
He does such a great job.
I particularly like him in Sneakers. He plays the blind. I forget what his character is. He's like an analyst, or he's on the computer maybe, but he's really good in that. And he's in a movie with Tom Cruise, too.
Nice.
David Strathern.
Woo. All right. Well, that's a good place, I think, for us to pause and take a break.
Do you love tea? Do you love entertainment? Do you love listening to stories from your two new BFFs? Then consider joining the club over at buymeacoffee.com. For $5 per month, you can be a part of the 1939 Club, otherwise known as the Golden Year of Cinema. When Gone with the Wind, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Stagecoach, Of Mice and Men, Wuthering Heights, Hound of the Baskervilles, The Little Princess, Babes in Arms, Goodbye Mr. Chips, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and of course, The Wizard of Oz were released. Perks include a 5% discount on new merchandise, a shout out for new members, an opportunity to be listed as a supporter in show notes, and exclusive access to bonus content. However, if you're feeling doubly generous, you can join the 1993 Club, otherwise known as the greatest year of cinema. This is the year that Schindler's List, The Sandlot, The Fugitive, Rudy, Robin Hood, Men in Tights, Sleepless in Seattle, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Mrs. Doubtfire, Grumpy Old Men, and of course, Jurassic Park were released. Additional perks in this club include a 10% discount on Scandal Water merchandise, the opportunity to record a shout-out of your own, and the chance to vote in our guaranteed content poll, along with the warm and sunny feeling that you're supporting your besties. If clubbing isn't your thing, there's a one-time gift option too. Either way, those who support Scandal Water report fewer bad hair days, more green lights in traffic, and a grander sense of purpose and wonder at least once per day. Scandal Water, we do the research, so you don't have to. So I looked during the break. He was in The Firm. That was the film he was in with Tom Cruise. And I showed Candy my favorite line of his, which is, I love your crooked little mouth.
Which I've seen The Firm a few times.
That's
I
him.
did not even remember that.
That is him.
Yes, he's so good. Well, back to A League of Their Own. I know I've referenced this several times, but you guys, if you are interested in this, you should watch that YouTube reunion because it's so fun to see the cast together and reflecting back on this experience. It was just lovely. But one of the questions the interviewer asked was about how difficult it was. For example, Geena Davis and Lori Petty's characters, developing that sibling rivalry, developing their relationship as sisters. And one of the first things, I think it was Geena, said it wasn't hard because we had a bond. Like all of us were so bonded. And it was cute because Lori Petty chimed in and said, well, it wasn't hard for me because I'm looking at a supermodel, beautiful actress who's coming off of basically Thelma and Louise and all these really big films. So she said feeling in the shadow and a little inferior wasn't a stretch for me at the time. This was actually before Lori Petty had done some of the films that brought more acclaim to her name too. This was one of her very early films. I think she said it was either her second or her third. Okay. But the other thing they commented upon was they were together so much and they're either playing games or they were in the bus a lot. Yeah. And the bus in particular was a place that was very tight, very enclosed. And Lori remembered Penny Marshall specifically telling them, when you're in these bus scenes and you're basically trapped for hours in this small setting, tap into your real life. Some of the things you would do to pass time or that you would be interested in your own personal life. And Lori Petty shared that she was an artist. So one of the things that she would do was basically work on her art while she was in those bus scenes. Nice. And that was something that also kind of made them feel more authentic as these people who were just kind of doing their thing on this bus together. And then some of the other actors chimed in and said they also played Truth or Dare to pass the time. And we heard
I would not play Truth or Dare with Madonna.
No. Well, actually, one actress said she was dared to run naked somewhere.
Nope.
Yeah, so thank you. All right. But they also sometimes had to touch up their own makeup because you couldn't get people in there. Like they would basically hand them powders or whatever through the window.
Your nose.
Right. Yes. So before she passed, Penny Marshall actually had a conversation with filmmakers who were talking to her about the possibility of doing a new series based on A League of Their Own. And during this conversation, one of the things that she reportedly shared with them was that she fully understood that there was so much more material there that could have been covered. She said 100% you have enough for a television series, some type of a series, because she said she had tried to use more of it herself and she couldn't.
There just wasn't enough time. It almost needed to be a mini series when she did it, but you didn't really. Right. She couldn't have done that.
She ended up having to cut the movie down. Their first cut was something like 4 hours long.
Whoa.
Yes. She had to cut that movie. And so some of the things that she really wanted to address had to be taken out. In fact, I think one of the things that was mentioned was you had just this one tiny scene where there was a black woman who came up and she
threw the ball.
And it was so clear this woman should be on one of these teams. And but at this time, it was historical accuracy said it was segregated at this time. So that was something that did not get developed in the movie, but was just the tiniest hint. But something else that has been talked about a lot that was cut was a kiss between Jimmy Dugan and Geena.
Oh, I'm glad they cut that.
As Dottie. Yeah, absolutely. They said there was a moment when he leans in for the kiss, and they said when they showed it to audiences, they hated it. Yeah. They hated it. And the real female players from the original league, they were like,
said that would never happen.
Absolutely not. They said, absolutely not. You are misrepresenting. Please don't even put the idea out there that a woman whose husband was overseas would have gotten into a relationship with somebody else, because that was not something that was happening. So they took that out, and I'm sure they didn't even balk at it. But I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting thinking about that was the fact that somebody commented in one of those sources that this is one of the few sports movies where, when you think about the whole breadth of, range of sports movies, this is one of the very few where you don't have some kind of a love story built in.
Well, they kind of did. Marla got her little love story with Nelson.
It was a subplot, but it wasn't a developed, watching this romance develop. I mean, we obviously, Dottie, we felt her love for her husband. We knew that a lot of these people had loving relationships, and we felt that, but it wasn't something that the plot not developed, I don't think.
Yeah.
So that was something else I think that made this stand out.
I liked
a sports
it.
film.
I didn't think it needed it.
I didn't either.
It had enough going on.
Absolutely. In terms of response, A League of Their Own was a critical and commercial success, grossing over $132 million worldwide. And of course, Penny Marshall got a lot of high praise for her direction, and the cast members got a lot of wonderful attention. As we've said, this was a little bit of a kickstart for Tom Hanks and getting his career going again. In 2005, the line "There's No Crying in Baseball" was voted number 54 on the list of the best movie quotes of all time by the American Film Institute. And in 2012, the Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the United States National Film Registry as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And you've already mentioned that to this day, it remains the highest grossing baseball movie of all time. You know, one thing that I also appreciated that was addressed in that reunion meeting of the actors was Lori Petty did such a good job of straight up addressing some of the things that happened in the movie that at the time were viewed as being very funny, but of course nowadays we realize
it's not funny.
Not funny, not okay. So here's what Lori had to say about that.
It was awful. And when Miss Cuthbert got dirt thrown in her face, and then when Tom kissed her and he was grossed out, and then, I mean, there's just a million horribly sexist things that were funny, you know, back then, which were not funny now, but that's okay, because when you know better, you do better.
Yeah, that's one of the notes that I made too. I didn't like the treatment of Mrs. Cuthbert. I thought it was awful where he said, "I loved you in The Wizard of Oz," and he acted grossed out by her. She was just doing what she had to do, as I'm assuming she was the team chaperone. So I didn't like that. I also didn't like the jokes they kept making about Marla and the way she looked. They kept making a joke out of her being ugly, which is, I feel like you have to be really confident as an actress to be cast and to know that your face is going to be the literal butt of jokes. I didn't like it at all.
I didn't either. I think it was very much common at that time to laugh at people's expense. And in some ways, it makes me go back to Jon Lovitz's lines. Remember, all the ones that were most popular were the ones that were digs, or the ones that were basically
the insults,
jabs or insults. So I think a lot of times people do laugh at that type of humor, but I didn't enjoy it either. Why are we laughing just because he's insulting this woman who's
even the dad says, you know, don't blame her because it's my fault that she looks the way that she does. You know, don't punish her because of me. Take her because she's a really good ball player.
Yeah. So no movie's perfect.
No,
obviously.
It's not.
And I love what Lori said. When you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
And hopefully we do better with some of those things nowadays, although I'm sure there's plenty of room for growth still.
True. Well, let's talk about some stuff that we did like.
I want to ask about the big controversy, but before we go there, I do want to ask, why do you love it? Why do you think everybody still loves this movie? Why do you personally love it?
Why do I personally love it? I loved the female empowerment of it. I loved that we didn't have to have a romance, that they could be women who were athletes on their own and we didn't have to have a guy propping them up. I liked that they were take charge. I liked some of the lines in here. I thought they were really good life lines. I wrote down a couple of them. I wrote down where Daddy says to Marla, "Nothing's ever going to happen here. You got to go where things happen." But the line that I really liked, let me scroll down here, is where she says, "It just got too hard."
That's 100% the one I was getting ready to talk about.
It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great. And 100%. I wrote, what a life analogy.
I loved that. Wrote down the exact same quote. Yes, 100% yes. And to add to what you've already said, I would also echo that idea of, I loved that this was historically true, although, you know, fictionalized in ways, but I loved the historical truth behind it. I loved these women. I loved what they did in real life. I loved how this group of actresses portrayed it. And I loved that these relationships were very female-centric. It made me think in a way of Frozen, you know, how
the women supported each other.
Broke the little trope of, you know, true love has to be between a man and a woman. Yeah. No, we focused in on this relationship between two sisters. Now, first and foremost, I think I loved seeing the importance placed on their love for each other and how it was competitiveness, but also, but
yes.
just that relationship, siblings, like that's such an important relationship in life. But then, yes, then it took it to, they were true sisters, but we had this sisterhood between everybody on that team. And you watched so many of them grow because of each other. When Rosie O'Donnell's character Doris realizes she doesn't have to put up with the abuse from the man,
rips it up and throws it out the door, or out the window.
Yes, that was like one of those moments where it was like, you have so much more self-worth and value now because these women have helped you see who you really are and what you're truly worth.
I also liked the growing respect between Jimmy, the coach, and the women, because he says women or girls can't play ball. You're not ball players. But later he says to Geena, he offers her some of that chew or the tobacco, and he says all the ball players use them, which is him saying to her, I think you're a ball player now.
Yes, absolutely. And they made him a better person. And I think he would never say that, but he clearly shows his awareness of that.
Right. He's a lot of ball players use it. It's the first time he referred to them as ball players. That's what I wrote. And I said I liked the scene of them on the bus. There was connection, but not romance.
Yes.
One more scene that I want to bring up that I thought, the other gut punch, I thought Shirley, where she couldn't read, that was like moved me with that telegram. That telegram scene. I felt the tears come up. That little intake of breath that Geena Davis's character and then it goes to Betty and her reaction and the women just hugging her. And then the realization of, we still have to go play a baseball game.
Yes.
Ooh, that hit me.
Oh, that was such a powerful
I just
scene.
wrote it was a gut punch.
It was, you know what? You bring up a good point. They were able, Penny Marshall and the other people involved in making this film, including the actors, did such a great job of evoking feeling from me in the most unexpected ways, sometimes by doing the simplest things. The opening of it, seeing this older character, knowing, like you already knew she had done something significant, and seeing it play out, knowing this is in her past, that alone had me started on an emotional level before we even got into the movie.
I did too. It was almost kind of, it was so melancholy at the end when they're all older and it's just the time has passed and this was their glory days and you're like, why do people have to grow old? You know, you just feel that way.
Yes, but there were several moments. You're absolutely right. That was just heartbreaking. But I actually got emotional. We've already referenced this scene, but that moment when Gary Marshall's character says basically it's over, we don't need them anymore.
His line,
it got me.
His line said, I love these girls. I don't need them, but I love them. I don't need them.
So dismissive. So dismissive. And I will say it was also, I guess another word that would be good to describe this would be thought-provoking. It was not just, emotional, but it was thought-provoking to have to watch Geena Davis's character Dottie, who clearly loved the game and loved playing the game and loved being good at it, have to decide where her priorities were. To have her decide, as much as I love this, I'm going to leave it
because I want to have babies.
To go be with my family. That was, I don't know what the word is. It tugged at your heart to think about. That's so true, that there are times in life when you have to make those decisions between two things you love dearly and which one is more important.
It's the impossible choice. You give in writing, they say, give your character an impossible choice and make them choose one of them. You can't have somebody come rescue them and say, you can have both. You have to pick one.
Yeah, and Jimmy Dugan, the coach, says to her, but you love this.
Yeah.
And you're so good at it.
Yeah.
But she chose her family and her husband. Yeah.
Armchair psychologist.
Well, I think that brings us to the armchair. And for our armchair, how could we not talk about one of the most hotly debated questions related to sports movies? It's still lingering 30-some years after this film was released. People always have an opinion about the ending. Did Dottie drop the ball on purpose to let her sister's team win and let her sister, make that home run? Or was that just a true sports accident? Was that just how it worked out?
Okay. Do you want to say your opinion first?
I just want your opinion.
Okay. Well, to say my opinion, let me say at the start of the film, they set up the whole dynamic when they're walking from the field. Like, we set up who's older, who's the baby, who's bossy, who's the rebel. Their whole relationship is in one exchange. Dottie outplays her sister. They're competitive, but Dottie is confident and Kit is angry. She's angry and jealous through this whole film. And that's one of the things that I don't like about the ending is I feel like we kind of just don't ever address that, and she gets rewarded but doesn't change. So here's what I wrote out. Do I think Dottie dropped the ball on purpose? Not at all. She saw her sister was upset and crying in the dugout, and she told the pitcher to throw high ones because she knew her sister's weak spot and knew she was feeling emotional and would swing for the high ones. When her sister actually hits the ball, Dottie's genuinely surprised. You can see her looking like, I did not expect her to do that. I think when Kit rounded that, she surged all of that anger and jealousy and literally did what she's been wanting to do the whole film, which was knock her sister down a peg. And I think she just dropped it because of all of that emotion and power, and I think it just fell out of her hand.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
All right. I don't even really honestly want to say my opinion because I think I'm too caught up in the research, because in a moment I'm going to share with you what the actresses said. But off mic, you told me that you would rewrite the ending.
I did, yes.
How would you change it?
Okay, do you want to? All right. Instead of having, I wrote this out, so I'm reading this. Instead of having Kit be traded, I would have kept her on the team, building the tension between the sisters naturally, and at the big game, I'd still have them have that argument about the high ball, but let it be a reflection of the earlier game where Dottie tells Kit not to go for them, Kit says she can make it, but she actually does make it. Then her sister being surprised can still be genuine, but there wouldn't be malice in Dottie telling the pitcher to throw high ones, and then Kit could hit a home run that wins the game for the Peaches, making her the hero. Dottie then can have a moment where she's proud that her sister's come into her own, and we have our team that we've followed this whole time actually winning the game. I read that it's true to history that the Peaches didn't win, but Racine did, so switch the teams and we follow it and make it the Racine team that we're following this whole time. It just bothered me that we rewarded the jealous, petty sister with a victory, and then their making up at the end didn't really feel like making up because they didn't really see each other over the years. And I think if they'd stayed on the same team and then the sister stays and then she chooses to leave, there just would have been a little more sweetness to that.
I'm going to agree with you about that last part. I did feel like it was disappointing. You know, if you're going to go for the really happy ending, these two sisters are bonded. They are in close contact all these years. It's not as though years later we're going to have this, hug and this moment. That actually kind of bothered me too. It didn't feel like they had the relationship you want them to have if this was truly the happy ending.
Right,
for
if they're
them.
gonna bond, because she says in the top of the film, like, oh, I haven't seen her in a while. Like, it sounds like they have not. And even at the end, when she says you're gonna come home for Christmas and all this, it's like, well, I don't know, I may not. But it just all felt like them breaking up instead of them coming together. It was like a goodbye forever. Where if they had been on the same team and she'd won for the team, she'd be like, I feel good going home. You're in good hands. You can go off on your own. They put her on the other team so she could break out of her sister's shadow. But if she'd made the winning home run for that team, it'd been just better. Yeah,
it's almost like they prioritized Lori Petty's character Kit having her arc of achieving what she wanted, achieving her success over our focus on the story of the sibling relationship. Yeah. Kind of more the
and
individual.
she never really was
pair.
Sorry. She even says, just when I want you to stay, you're leaving. Well, she only wants her to stay because she's like, well, you just wanted it more than me. That's it.
Well, that's interesting. I love hearing how you would have done it differently. I also loved hearing what the actors had to say about this. So I'm going to play, I think this is a little over a minute from this reunion show where they talk about this question.
Okay.
Here's the question that everybody has asked off and on again. Did Dottie drop the ball on purpose?
Don't
sister. She's like, you're going to earn it. She wouldn't give that away to her at the end.
I don't think she did either.
No.
Yeah, I kind of lean that way as well. Well, any last thoughts about the movie before we sign off here?
I don't think so. It was really good to revisit and to watch with I would have been 12 when it first came out. So it had a different, if I saw it the year it came out, I don't remember. I saw it shortly after, but I'm in a different mindset now, and it's neat to go back I'm looking back on young me and rewatching it from a different lens.
Yeah. I found this Sports Illustrated quote, which I thought might be a nice way to bring this to a close. So I'll read this to you and then we can cheers our way out.
All right.
This is talking about people going to see some of the exhibits and some of the things honoring this, okay? They came because they loved the cast with its crackling, sparkling chemistry. Geena Davis, Tom Hanks, Rosie O'Donnell, and Madonna, because it's so darn funny. Because even the minor characters are fleshed out with details that make them memorable. Because it's a sports movie. A women's sports movie that's really about sports, physical and intense and shown on screen rather than squeezed in as an afterthought. Because of all its one-liners. Because its portrayal of sisterhood is pitch perfect, expertly navigating the intense, fraught overlap between love and competition. Because there's no crying in baseball. Because sometimes there is crying in baseball. Because all these years later, there is still room to argue, did Dottie really drop the ball on purpose? Because it's a great movie about baseball and a great movie about sisters and a great movie, period. I thought that was really well
That's
said.
good. That's a really good summary, yes.
Why don't we cheers the women, the original players of the AAPGBL.
Yes.
These incredibly powerful, empowering women whose story got told here, and also Penny Marshall.
Who brought it to the screen.
Right, so that we know about it
Yeah.
and we remember it.
Absolutely.
Cheers to you, ladies.
Cheers.
If you love what we do, please rate and review our show. Or you can become a supporter by making a donation through buymeacoffee.com/scandalwaterpod. Whether a single gift or a recurring monthly donation, it would go a long way towards supporting our work and allowing us to keep the tea brewing.
At our website, www.scandalwaterpodcast.com, you can submit questions or your own story ideas, access our sources and show notes, see the merch we offer for sale, and more. You can join the Scandal Water community through our Scandal Water Podcast Facebook page or follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Scandal Water Podcast.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music. Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.